Okay, you have a small crowd, that's great. Since we posted an agenda, I'm going to call the meeting to order of the Rutland Open Space Committee. This is our first visioning session for the open space
I found 3 alarms.
and recreation plan. So let's kind of dive into this.
Recording.
Oh, and we are recording both live streaming and for the future, so for television and online, so just know this. So a quick introduction of our members. I'm going to ask each of us to kind of introduce themselves and give a quick snippet. For members, make sure you turn on your microphone when you speak. So I am Melissa Danza. I'm the chair and one of the Conservation Commission representatives. A little bit about myself is I am the agent for the Conservation Commission in another municipality. So I've written a couple of these, so I'm very happy to bring that to the town. I'm big into open space, passive recreation, and I do a lot with native plants and invasive species. So I will hand it off to Brian. He can introduce himself.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm going to take this off while I'm talking. My name is Brian Bjorkland. I'm the vice chair and at-large member. I've lived in town for 4 or 5 years now, and I work for the Department of Agriculture, doing wildlife disease research and management in southeastern Mass, and I've been doing that for 17 years. So happy to bring my background in wildlife and also invasive species to the table like Melissa.
Oh, sure. Good morning, everyone. Jared Gittalucci. I'm our other representative from the Conservation Commission, on the commission with Melissa. I've lived in town now. I'm sort of a newbie, been here a little over 3 years, but joined the Conservation Commission a couple of years ago. My background, I'm a civil engineer. I work in niche engineering. I've done that for over almost 18 years now. And so I deal a lot with wetlands in my job, which was a big reason why I wanted to join the Concom. So I bring that perspective to both the Conservation Commission, but also open space recreation plan.
George?
Hi, my name is George Farrington. I'm an at-large member. I've been in town with my family now for 8 years. My family and I were attracted to the town for its open space and the town's beauty, and I'm actually a brain tumor and brain injury survivor, and when I got sick, the community really rallied around me, and I figured the best way I could give back would be to help preserve the open space and come up with a recreation plan for it. So here I am. Thank you.
He's also going to be our social media guru when we start getting that underway, so be prepared. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Leah Whiteman. I'm a select board member here in town. We've lived in town, I think about 11 years. My husband and 3 kids and I just started my 2nd term on the select board. And one of the things attracted us to Rutland, my husband grew up in Holden, I grew up from southern Pennsylvania, is the open space and having the opportunity to be outside. And especially coming out of the pandemic, through the pandemic, I realized how fortunate we were to have so much open space available to us without having to travel great distances. So we had lived in Boston and suburban Boston for a number of years before moving to Rutland. And so just to be mindful and appreciative of that has been really something. So as Melissa kind of stated a little before the meeting started, we've been working on a town center study and updating the town's master plan also. In addition to this open space and recreation plan. So it's a lot of visioning opportunity for the town and kind of to set the vision for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So thank you for coming out today.
Leah also does our minutes as well, and we thank her for that. Dick.
Oh, thank you. I had to turn it on. Doggone it. Dick Williams. Been in town all my life so far, 78 years. On Overlook Farm. Farmer myself up there after my father got moved to cows. But anyways, I've been on various boards in this town. Concom for 25, roughly 28 years on planning board so far. And there's so many others. And my heart is in this town. I try to do the best I can. And I'm going to try my best here too, even though I'm not too much computer literate. We'll see what happens. Anyways, I am pleased, and I hope we can go forward and really push the agenda of goals and objectives. Thank you.
Hi everybody, Paul Hanley. I'm kind of newbie to town and I guess to town service in general, but I've lived in town for about a year with my wife Tammy. We've lived in a number of different places. We moved recently from Texas, so I got to see a lot of cool stuff that other places have done. So hope to bring that perspective, and town service was important to my wife and I, and we're younger, so just started up, learn about the town itself and kind of what goes into all of this was kind of my goal of helping.
Great, and we also have Kevin Jardy on the board, the planning board representative, who's not here today. He also is part of Alta Vista Farm, Milgram, so he's a big part of town as well. So I want to give first a thank you to all our open space committee members for being here, for being on top of this. We are just starting, so let's kind of talk about why we're here and what is the open space and recreation plan. So most importantly, it's kind of a tool in which the community, in this case Rutland, plans for the future of the conservation and recreation resources. So it's mostly, the main point of this is to find your goals and objectives, and those are solely created through public input and involvement. So this is step one. The last plan was updated in 2017, and it's going to expire next November in 2022. But this plan will be valid for 7 years, while the previous one was valid for 5. And when having an approved open space and recreation plan through the state, it allows the town to be eligible for more grants, more specifically through DCS, the Department of Conservation Services. Most likely, or the goals are typically around trail management, whether it's the expansion, creation, maintenance, and also just general kind of open space upkeep and other aspects. For those of you who we were kind of talking a little bit before, it's a little bit more than just what the name signifies. It is about open space and it is about recreation, but you can also expand it to talk about ecological health. A lot of towns that have a lot of wetland resources, whether it's reservoirs, water supplies, like we do. We talk about water quality health, biodiversity, ecological health, and then you get into your open space management. And that can be anywhere from utilizing our existing services and spaces to acquiring more, or whether it's we need to get access, or we want to have trails, or there's no one good that oversees it. So it's very multifaceted, and it's as multifaceted as the town wants it to be. So if the town wants it to be that more focused, and they're just focusing on the open space and maybe the recreation side of it, and the biodiversity and ecological health, while it's not important, maybe it's not that major goal. Maybe it's one of that subset goal within a larger objective. So keep that in mind as we kind of discuss that. It really is up to you. What do you think is important? And so we're here because the open space and recreation plan expires next year. Like I said, the goals are created from public input. So today we're going to be asking 3 fundamental questions. We're going to be going over the goals and objectives from the 2017 plan, and coming out of those, we're going to ask you, what are we doing well, what could be better, and what more could be done. So, what are we doing well is pretty self-explanatory. What could be better can be, and these can both be reflective of what's going to be on your screen from the past one, or things that you are aware of, in your own lives that maybe wasn't touched upon. So really, broaden your minds, think about what is important to you as a resident of Rutland. And then, so what could be better is typically things that we are kind of doing but we could expand upon. And then what more can be done is more so what can be done that we're not doing. So keep that in mind as we talk about the 2 differences. And then also at the end, we're going to have members, you're going to call stuff out, and we're going to write them up there. And then at the end, you're each going to be given a marker, and you're going to put off a tick mark on your 5 priority items. So keep that in mind, that if there's something that you are prioritizing, you want to make sure it's up there, so you can put your tick mark next to it. And then, there's not too many people here, so we're going to still do some survey work and stuff coming out of this, but this group is going to help us really delve into, the first part, is there anything from the 2017 Open Space and Recreation Plan that carries over? And then on top of that, what's new and what's relevant for, the majority of us. All right, so we're going to get into these 2017 goals. So the quick overview, so one of them is preserve the existing character of Rutland. That's pretty consistent throughout a lot of our town plans, master plan, etc. It came up again. So I wouldn't be surprised if that comes up, but if it doesn't, that's okay. Number 2, preserve or acquire prime farmlands, wetlands, and wildlife habitats. Number 3, provide additional recreation programs and facilities for all age and demographic groups. And number 4, protect valuable water resources from adverse impacts. So, I think, you ready for this one?
No, but I'm gonna ask for help.
Yeah, and this is a big chart, this is taken right exactly from the 2017 plan. So these is the main objectives under this goal of preserving existing character of Rutland. And then you break it down into the specific action items. So you have your overarching goal, and then how we would get there to accomplish these objectives.
If I may, quick before we start, I think there's a little bit of questions before about if the current open space and recreation plan is available. It should be available on the Conservation website, Conservation Commission website off the Town of Rutland website. And I think there's 2 copies in the library here available to take out to borrow. So if anybody's interested in not spending all the time here, but kind of as homework and delving deeper, it should be available.
Anyways, like I say, this is not my cup of tea, and I'm going to need all the help I can. And it says manage land uses along major roads. And one of the biggest things that we've had is trying to zone for business, housing. We at the planning board don't do too much on recreation, but I tell you, it's one of the bigger things today, and has been in my work for quite some time. So how would you classify some of these roads? I would like to hear your opinions on what roads in town should we be protecting more. One's closer to the center or out in the suburbs of Rutland, you might say. Right at the moment, the zoning map is not very very colorful, you might say, for businesses and things like that. And Route 68 is one of the things that we've been trying to push for businesses and the village centers, north and Four Corners for businesses. And I don't know if we're going to expand on that in the future. I also feel that because of businesses, and this is not open space and rec, I know, but you always have to put this in mind. There's going to be trucks traveling through town. Do you want trucks near your recreation or anything to do with open space where you want to have quiet and peace? And to me, that's one of the bigger things that I have to say that you probably don't even know, but Route 49 stopped in Spencer. It was supposed to go all the way up into New Hampshire, and it was supposed to be right down here at Long Pond going by. And to me, that would solve a lot of trucks utilizing coming through town or 56. And to me, that's one of the things that I would love to have seen taken care of. I don't think the state's gonna do anything about it, but I'll keep pushing as long as I can. Recreation. And my feelings are that we have very limited space in the center of town. I believe the town has, how can I say, I'm gonna be the heck no. Town screwed up. The town should have picked up more land for recreation. And also, I have to also blame some of it on the planning board. And when they had open space, they were supposed to have tried to set aside parcels, but most of the parcels that you see on some of these subdivisions are so steep, you're not gonna get proper land for recreation. But I feel that in many places that we should try to push and get more fields, more rec. They've been trying to, have a place for woosocks to have practices and things like that. And it would have been nice because that would draw in other businesses. And I would think that, I don't know, I'm gonna open up to you people to, think about it and how should we move on managing the lands along major highways. We're trying to keep the town moving in the right direction. Right? Need input. On the other, preserving historic, in my there are sites in town that I'll lay you odds that maybe 40% of you probably don't know about, and it's too bad because I do feel that past is something that we should keep track of. As I put it on the back of my folder, don't reinvent the wheel. We need to, the town does not put, in my opinion, enough money aside for recreation. We need to preserve recreation, historic. We need to teach the kids about our past in this town. And to me, that it's so important. I spend a little bit of time teaching kids through the Ag Commission at second grade over here, planting and things like that. To me, for crying out loud, is phenomenal. And hopefully in the near future, Ag is going to have a mobile greenhouse to move to the various schools. And hopefully that will help in that area. Historic. The biggest thing in town right at the moment is the prison camp. I'm on the Ware River Advisory Committee, very upset because we were not notified of what they wanted to do down there. And hopefully input sometime in the future, we will be asking more about that. I'm hoping DCR's shut down for the time being of doing anything down there, so let's hope that historically we can preserve that, which I feel that we will in the future. Save the Common. Was up there, I believe, improve the town common. Need your input. Where do we build a new common? You do know that the majority of the common in front of the library right here is owned by Mass Department of Transportation, and half of the one in front of the town hall roughly is theirs too. That's one of the reasons why I feel the town has let us down, because I feel that in the past they probably could have done something about it. But now where traffic is getting very heavy, I imagine MassDOT will not want to turn it back over to the town or anything else like that. who knows, they may want to put a rotary up here for Palmagussit and Main Street. One doesn't know at the present time. So keep in mind about maybe an area that can be designated as a new town common or something very close. It might require, you know, a lot of grant money and patience and time to get it. And communications. I love the sign out there. Finally, it's in on the common with no easement from the Department of Transportation yet. But I feel communications in town need to be upgraded, and I can't say this for sure because in my opinion I am old-fashioned. I don't know how to operate most generally the computer or some of the stuff. Some of the iPhone I can dial and text people, and that's about it. I don't know anything else about it. And you look at the age group and things like that and whatever, and maybe communications, the younger generations is fine, but I can't speak on behalf of them. But yes, communications, even within town departments, is very crucial. And been more than once that I have gone to the town clerk and tried to find out information about things, and she has to agree that it's not very good in town. So we need to improve communications and signage. If we had signage, maybe you people would know some of the areas. Anybody know where Holbrook property is?
Without looking at them.
It's one thing where I wish I was right at this moment. Right across from the cemetery, coming into the town from Holden's Way, is Holbrook. Used to be a nice house in there and a farm. The barn I don't remember, but when I mow down there, I brush hog that whole area in the fall. And just looking at the foundations is fantastic. The amount of work is something around in there. It was a well. Wells all over the place. And there's also a rock quarry up in the back. So on the town center, we're trying to see what we can do about getting that maybe for the town somehow. 1/3 of it is owned by the trustees of reservation, thank goodness, and the other 2/3 is owned by Mr. Blair, or Blair Builders. So I am hopefully, I know I talked to Mrs. Blair a long time ago. I'd love to see it in her father, Tony Martelli's name park down there. And to me, what a place to be, because it is so nice in there. Really, really beautiful. I'm stopping right there.
All right, so that was goal 1. You know, Dick went over most of the objectives. You know, and those were the specific actions that, you know, kind of touched on that maybe some things that we didn't do as well. So did we do them because they weren't as important as we thought, or maybe it's because we didn't have the resources we need, or maybe it wasn't a committee. So think of that, you know, as we get to those bigger questions, you know, and we'll bring these back up as we're talking, so don't feel like you have to memorize them. So goal 2, preserve prime farmlands, wetlands, and wildlife habitats.
Thank you. And to follow up with what Dick said, that property, there's some fantastic hiking and biking trails behind that field that everybody should take a chance to go out there and check out. They're wonderful. So as a biologist, I took on this slide. Objective number 1 is to protect the wetlands and wildlife habitats. And I really focused in on the vernal pools and sensitive habitats to report rare wildlife and plants, in addition to managing invasive and destructive species. Just recently this year, there was a spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive bug, discovered in Pittsburgh for the first time, and that could be devastating to a lot of our woodlands. So we'd like to start to maybe develop a plan where we can involve, citizens to inspect their properties or something along those lines, and work alongside with USDA Plant Protection and Quarantine to get that ball rolling. Early detection is key, as with a lot of different things. We're seeing that a lot of the sensitive land is being scooped up and developed, and we'd like to get a better handle on that, where we can really preserve these sensitive areas and wetlands. Number 2 was to preserve farmlands and forest lands. Like George mentioned in his intro, the reason we moved to town was because we were drawn to the open space and the farmlands, and that's why we moved out of West Boylston and Holden, because those lands were being built up. And we're starting to see that here as well, and we'd like to do what we can do to preserve those lands, farmlands and forest lands. Talk to landowners to maybe put their properties in some sort of conservation easement or whatnot. I know Melissa has a lot of experience with that. So let's see. And then also enhance and increase conservation lands, like Dick mentioned with that property over on Main Street. There's also another property off of Skyline that probably very few of you are familiar with, Hope Ridge, and that's another really incredible piece of property that really nobody knows about. So outreach and letting the public know that these properties exist, work with different groups, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and other nonprofits to maybe work on trails or signage or picnic areas or whatnot, just to get people outside and enjoy what we have here in town. We've got a lot of resources that really people are not all that familiar with. And I just discovered that on the Rutland Town website there is a link for trails. There's not much on there, but I think that we can really beef that up. And then once work with Mass Fish and Wildlife to maybe put aside some land for wildlife management areas that could be protected forever. And then finally, develop a financial plan to acquire and maintain conservation lands. So ask town residents for donations of land or services, or establish an ad hoc committee to research options for acquiring and improving conservation or recreation areas. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Melissa, or anybody else in this.
Can I just add? I know the past couple years we've had some opportunities come before town meeting. So this is where we as citizens have a lot of say in this also. I think recently the town was able to have a large, about 77, 80 acres off of Overlook Road, deeded to the Conservation Commission, so that will remain as open space and conservation land. That came before a town meeting and needed to be voted on for the town to acquire. And also a few years ago, I think AgCom was able to establish a small fund with a little bit of seed money from free cash at one of the meetings to start a little nest egg if available lands come on the market, that we can pool resources between AgCom and nonprofits and everything to maybe preserve some of those pieces of land that become available. So I just wanted to say, this comes back to town meeting and town involvement. Obviously, you're all here and showing a vested interest, but just to get out that's it really comes down to us. We have the say, so thanks for coming out. But
Actually, Melissa, before you jump to the next one, just to build off on that, on item 4, that's actually something we talked about at Conservation Commission meetings too, is are there ways we can find funding sources so that we can maybe take advantage of, say, property comes out of 61A and we get right of first refusal, and a lot of times to be able to purchase that property can be a lot of money, but if there's a way to create an account, however that may be done, one way that's thrown out is through some additional tax, something of that nature, which is obviously not something that everybody likes, but thinking of ways that we can maybe create some sort of funding or account to take advantage of that, because a lot of times when that comes across, you know, our desk at the Conservation Commission, there's really not much we can do because we don't have the funds available to purchase property like that.
Yeah, and I think what you're hinting at, it's something called the Community Preservation Act, which, has Rutland tried to pass it before?
Yes.
Yes?
We did.
Okay.
It failed.
Yeah. So, you know, I'd recommend, you know, if you're not familiar with it, kind of going home and doing a little bit of looking. It's called the Community Preservation Act. It creates a community preservation commission. So it's a group of residents, just like any other committee in town, that, you know, goes through applications. It's for open space, recreation, historical preservation, low-income housing, I think I said historical. You know, it's very specific. So it is kind of an additional tax on us that does get a certain amount of match from the state. And it is, a lot of towns and cities do use it, and it's a great resource, or it can be, you know, and it's not necessarily a flat tax. You can be exempt from it depending on income. So, you know, we want to make sure we are equitable in ensuring, you know, the open space and what we're taking from people. So it's something to think about, and I definitely recommend educating yourselves, whether you like it or not. You know, that's not necessarily what we're here to talk about, but it's one avenue, so things like that.
Just to let you know, the first vernal pool, you know where it was? Overlook Farm.
I've got a few I'm working on.
And for anyone not familiar, vernal pool is a seasonal kind of depression. In typically March or early spring during our rainy season, it typically dries up during the summer. It's for our vernal pool species, which are kind of certain kinds of salamanders, frogs, fairy shrimp, etc. That's their breeding habitat. That's the only place that they breed, and they're very important. And a lot of times they're not captured under the Wetlands Protection Act because they're not always a regulated resource area, because they don't qualify, because they don't have a hydrological connection. So just for educational resources. And so third goal, provide recreational programs and facilities for all age and demographic groups.
I can take this one. This is more my speed. I'm not a wetland biologist like Brian's. I think you know, when I reviewed this page, this one kind of sounds a lot like I think what you'd expect when you talk about an open space plan. You're talking about recreation in town, kind of. When you walk down the objectives, it's kind of in line with, you know, what are we doing well now? How do we maintain it? And what are some of the things that we'd like to do in the near and longer term? And you know, how do we make those things happen? So number one is maintain town-owned recreational areas. You know, a lot of these, I kind of looked at what was called out in the 2017 plan and, you know, what we've done thus far. And I'm not sure if everyone took the town center survey or was kind of in tune on the plan. But a lot of these things were talked about and addressed in the study itself. You know, we call out a number of these properties and things that, you know, the town has talked about doing with them. So, you know, when you talk about maintenance, it's existing things that we'd like to maintain: parks, town-owned properties, rec areas. How do we maintain them? How do we, you know, fund the maintenance of them? And you know, a lot of the folks in town and the committees in town who are involved with that. Number two is about increasing the awareness and enjoyment of rec facilities. I think, you know, everyone's kind of talked about the best way to reach the most amount of people in town. Social media, signage, all of those things, and how, you know, what things we can do better with what we have. I think the sign in the center of town is a good example. You know, I myself have been aware of a lot more things going on in town just by driving by and taking a read. And then things that I think we can put in specific places, the state park, other areas, so people are just aware of, you know, things that they can go and take advantage of. And then number three is, you know, the way that I read this one is, you know, what are things that we can go and do again in the kind of the near and the long term. the number 3, develop trail to connect Putnam Park with the rail trail. I know that was one that was specifically addressed in the town center survey. The cooperation with state agencies, again, how do we look at these and fund them and address them? So these are, I think these are the things that when we break and we talk about things that we don't have that we'd like to have, these are the things that we can call out. And then number 4 is kind of the same as it was on the last slide. How do we think about funding all of the things that we kind of outlined in a roadmap? And the CPA, the Preservation Act, I know was also raised as a way to do that. So that's kind of the rundown of goal number 3.
Anything from other members in the room? And our last goal, protect valuable water resources from adverse impacts.
So our first objective under this goal is preserving watersheds of lakes and reservoirs, and we had 3 action items related to this objective. So encouraging private owners to enhance stewardship of land through Chapter 61 programs, preparing bylaws, regulations to help deal with pollution from stormwater runoff, and then also updating, implementing stormwater management program to deal with EPA construction general permit for our municipal stormwater system. So we have made some progress on these action items. We do have a stormwater bylaw in town. We do have a stormwater management plan. That's something that the DPW has been implementing. I think that was developed at least a couple years ago that those were developed. So we have made some headway on those items, but I think it's certainly something that there more could be done. We've actually talked, the Conservation Commission at a few of our meetings have talked about enhancing the stormwater regulations, possibly even thinking about doing a stormwater permit for new projects that come in front of us, whether they are dealing with proximity to wetlands or maybe they're not near wetlands, but would still need some sort of stormwater permit. Because I can tell you, as a civil engineer, one of my areas of expertise is designing stormwater management systems to deal with the treatment of that water, promoting recharge so we can recharge the aquifer and the groundwater in these areas, dealing with development in a smart way so that we're not having issues like, let's say, what happened in Houston a few years ago. They did not have any stormwater regulations, and when the storm hit, they had massive problems because they weren't dealing with those projects on a project-by-project basis. They weren't dealing with that, and it came to a head a few years ago. And luckily, Massachusetts has been and continues to be pretty good when it comes to state regulations. But we've, again, talked about it through the Conservation Commission. I think there's more that could be done there potentially. But we have made a lot of headway on those items, so that's good. Second objective is preserving lands beside rivers and streams. And action item here is continuing to enforce Mass Rivers Protection Act. Wetlands Protection Act, was there a question?
Who does this enforcement?
So for this one, and I apologize, I forget. So the RSP tab is the responsible party. So for this specific one, it is the Conservation Commission and its whole. That is what our charge is. So, but other ones you'll see, I think AC is Agricultural Commission, or Wetlands DPW, CC is Conservation Commission. So that's also part of the plan, is we have to designate a responsible party, how we're going to fund it, and the years that we're going to implement these goals.
But I mean, like, do you call the police? Do you have police authority? When it says enforcement, if you find a violation, then what happens?
It's still through the CONCOM for the most part. We have a series of, we have it called enforcement orders. So if we find a Wetland or Rivers Protection Act violation and it is under our jurisdiction, then we have a set process for violations as designated in the Wetlands Protection Act. But it's a very good thing to think about, because one of my things that I told my committee members as soon as we started is the actions that we have, they need to be actionable. I personally don't like the continued enforcement, because what does that mean? How do you really enumerate that? So our goal as committee members is to, whether it's the SMART goal plan, the realistic, the timely, etc. In this iteration, I think at least I really want to focus on making sure that we have kind of those really designated tasks that we can better understand our progress for the next round.
If I may, I think Rutland does not have any official enforcement agents or agencies, so it's really resident reporting or self-reporting that then it gets filtered to the appropriate board or commission for review. So that would be if, you know, there's a suspected violation or something, a letter to Concom, and then Concom would investigate. But Concom is not out exploring the town, you know, if they're in works with a developer, a family homeowner or something, then they're out, but the town doesn't have the means to be out actively enforcing. So it really kind of falls to us as residents to be aware and have some of those neighborly conversations. Maybe it's just a don't know, if that's not a comfortable situation, a note to, in this case, Concom is like, hey, heads up, can you just take a look at this, or whatever.
Yes.
But I think between that and maybe I answered your question.
Yeah, and it's to Leah's point, like a lot of towns, like, essentially my position, I work for the town of Southborough, as the conservation agent. So while I still don't, you know, drive around town looking for violations, I can more easily address violations quicker because I'm a staff person. Right now, the Concom, we have a fantastic admin, but we don't have someone who, you know, goes out and does site visits. That's all of us on the weekends, etc. So it is a lot of resident involvement, and you know, we always say, if you have a question, if you see something, please let us know, because we're happy to, you know, investigate whether it's, you know, a violation or not. We do follow up on each one.
And we've had actually a few of them have happened just, I'll say, over the last 6-8 months.
Mhm.
We've had a few residents reach out to us, say, hey, I think there might be something going on here, maybe a violation, maybe not. And then we say, all right, let's take a look at it. Sometimes we may realize, yep, they should have filed something with us, let's get that process going. Other times we look at it and say, actually, they're okay, because what they're doing is not having a detrimental impact to the wetlands, or maybe the wetlands are further away than they originally thought. So, but yes, it's typically something that we do need residents to speak up and let us know if you do see something that may be an issue, and then we can take a look at it. So going to our third objective here, protecting the town's water supply, we have one action item under this one as well. So this is developing alternate water sources to augment Mush Park Pond water supply for drought and future needs of Rutland residents. As far as I know, I don't think a lot of progress was made on this particular action item. So if this is one that folks are, you know, feels an important one, this is something we can explore a little bit more, and maybe, like you were saying, Melissa, maybe putting a little more definition to this action item, so that we be a little bit more specific with what our true goal here is.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you very much for these presentations. I've learned a lot, even though I've lived in Rutland for 20 years. There's a lot of what you said that I wasn't aware of. And I might have missed something, but I'm wondering what's going on with the old hospital property.
Which one?
The prison camp.
The one on Maple Ave, between, you know, Maple Ave and 122.
So you're talking the Rutland Heights,
Yeah.
the old Veterans Hospital.
Yes.
Behind the middle school, yeah.
Did I miss something? Was that discussed in any of these?
No, right at the moment, I can say that the upper part, there are 3 parts to that property, and the upper part, which is the largest, that has the flagpole on it, you might say. At the moment, they're going through the process of how many units they're gonna put up there. It's gonna be over 55 senior center, senior housing up there, from 88 to 100, was it 100?
Yes.
142 or something like that, in that neighborhood. So, there's gonna be quite a few senior housing up there. It's Harbor Classic Homes is the people that are doing it. And we're waiting for them, the engineers are working on it right now to come before us and the planning board with their plans in the near future, so.
What about the other 2 sections?
We're hoping that we might put it, you know, the RDIC might put another RFP out for some type of business, who knows what, that might go by Mozio's Garage. And on the other side, maybe some kind of recreation where we have to be kind of careful what goes over there because of the little pond. I won't name what most of the people used to call it anyways over there, but there's a pond, and it was nice because there used to be a little golf course around that thing way back when it was the Vets Hospital, and also the Rose Garden was there too. very, very popular.
So the use of that property is not within the jurisdiction of this committee at all? I don't, I
No,
was
so
wondering
we-
why that wasn't mentioned during any of these
Yeah,
presentations.
so these are just from the goals from the 2017 Open Space and Recreation Plan. So right now, the charge of the Open Space Committee is just to draft the new Open Space and Recreation Plan to be approved in 2022. There's a specific committee for the heights, and so this, we might evolve. I think a lot of us on the committee want this committee to evolve into something else after this process is done. What that might look like, we don't know. That could also come out during this iteration of this plan, but essentially a lot of the other town properties and development is from other committees. So we don't have any jurisdiction, over the uses. We're just accumulating the priorities and goals of the residents for right now. And I think Peter might have some more input on that.
I do. By state law, the RDIC is solely responsible and has sole authority over the entire Heights property. Whether or not they use any for open space is entirely up to them and cannot be guided by any of the people here. Again, that's state law. They are working under the, I hate to call it direction, there was a master plan developed when the Heights property was assigned to RDIC, and one of the allowed uses was open space and recreation. But until the RDIC chooses to take action in that direction,
What is RDIC?
the Rutland Development and Industrial Commission. It is, it's 7-member board, is that right?
Yes.
It's a 7-member board appointed by the select board that has responsibility for the Heights and for, I hate to say development, but mostly promotion of town properties that can be used for any purpose. They're sort of a link between the town land and business somewhere who would want to use that land.
If I could, is there a reason why that state law is in effect?
Yeah, because we asked it to be.
The town of Rutland did.
Yes.
Because I saw when as we are a decade or more into this conversation I think needs to be escalated as far as having the open space involved, having the Board of Assessors involved, having the Planning Board involved, having AgCom involved. I think every single committee and every single person in town should be involved in the Rutland Heights property. So
Yes.
it's just for me frustrating because I've been on there. I was the chairman of the Board of Assessors and I wasn't allowed to say anything about anything coming in. It was, we were just held back. And so for me, small setting, I think that everybody should be a little more vocal about the ability to have this committee, any other committee that wants to speak up to the IDIC, and then have direct communication back as to what's going to happen, because there still doesn't seem to be a lot of communication.
Simply put, that is entirely under RDIC's decision. As a committee that is duly authorized, they have rules for how they operate, and one of those rules is that the chair decides what's on the agenda, and whether or not there's even a public comment section to the meeting.
They had a public comment section, it was at 6:30 in the morning. They had 6:30 in the morning public comment sections, they had one in the evening, and a bunch of people went and said, please do open spaces. There was a biology teacher who was taking his kids by the school, he was so fabulous. And nobody, I went and I thought, these people are not listening to us, they are doing this public thing because they have to. It was so discouraging. I
will mention that there is an open seat, last I heard. I don't believe it's been filled. So if somebody else wants to join.
Best of my knowledge, that seat is still open. Have not heard from Mike about it. I gave him the phone number of the gentleman, but have not.
So I guess one of my questions is it possible to, and sorry to come in at the end here, objective B, formulate a plan to be more involved in the RDIC property?
So I would say, I hate to put a kibosh on this, but that's what the next section is for.
There we go.
So, before we move into the fun part of this, does anyone have any questions about whether it's a term or, anything that we went over between these goals? Yeah.
I guess my biggest question, just listening since this has been going on, for 4 years now, is what specific projects or initiatives do you guys feel like have actually come out of this, have been worked on and were successes and maybe would be good for continuing?
So I think that's what we're starting to work our way through. Through the master plan, we have been updating what we call a benchmark review, which takes the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission is our vendor, and they've been accumulating kind of the action items from every plan that this town has, from the old master plan, our hazard mitigation plan, the open space and rec plan, etc. So we are itemizing kind of those actions that have been done. And it could be the case that maybe we haven't done as much as we should have. And I think that's okay. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to, is that a lot of these things maybe weren't prioritized, that these goals still exist, but we need better actions. So as we move into these next questions of what are we doing well, what can we do better, what can we do more of, or what can we do in addition to this, think of whether it's these or your own experience, whether it's about the heights, whether it's about the prison camps. I got, and I'll bring this up when we get there, I got an email from someone talking about better communication with DCR about the prison camps. So that's one very easy action item that if we, determine a responsible party that understands their responsibility, we can better start to move forward and tasking people with these items and these better timelines.
I think one of the things that we've been kind of mindful of, I'm on this committee as well as the master plan committee, and I was also on the town center study committee. And one of the things for all of those we're being mindful of is the implementation aspect. So I think the last iteration of these plans, a lot has happened, but I don't know how much of it has intentionally happened versus just passively happened. And so I think making sure that these become kind of living documents that the various boards and commissions look at on a frequent basis when they do goals and objective setting and everything, and we kind of do this, where are we, how are we doing, self-reflection, that these documents are actually utilized versus, a lot of us are just looking at this now and, oh, we did this, but it wasn't with the intentional thought of this is a goal from our open space and recreation plan. It was, this is what we want to do, so how can we do it? So I think that's, to your point, I think a lot has been done, but I don't know how much of it has been intentionally done versus.
Yeah. Just to follow, I'm asking just because I'm fairly new to Rutland, so I was just wondering if you guys had any specific examples of things, like you mentioned the stormwater and then the acquisition of one. Are there any other examples of projects that you guys feel were successes in the last few years that you?
Let's see. I hate to say no because I want to say we do things better, and I think it shows us that maybe our number one action should be that we keep the open space committee as a permanent committee, to kind of actively go over this and review and communicate and be the liaisons. What our charge could be it doesn't have to be as straightforward as just doing this open space and recreation plan. And I think that's a very easy, actionable item that can be done to better relay these goals and objectives in the future. So unfortunately, I can't think of anything specific. I know we're working on our town wetlands bylaw. So when you see that on town meeting, please come and vote.
I think one thing is this parking lot back here is fairly new, and one of the action items for utilizing recreation space was developing parking as well as other things. And I think through the concert series and everything the past couple months, trying to encourage people to park a little bit farther away but still have that walkability piece it's a new mindset for town to walk a little bit farther. I think we all are accustomed to kind of parking right where we need to be. But with the parking lot here, we can centrally park and still be accessible to pretty much all of town center, the 2 of the 3 schools, the library, all the way down to the heights, easily walk. So I think there's been pieces, again, that have happened. And so it's just kind of piecemeal at this point. And a lot of that is funding is really tough in town, and we can't do a lot of this without funding. And so finding ways to either creatively have it happen with donations or whatever, in-kind work, whatever it may be, or looking for grant opportunities is really our.
So who's responsible for asking town residents? That last line says, ask town residents. Have any town residents been asked for donations of property or services?
It's also, the RLC is also the Rutland Land Conservancy. You know, I know in the past they have gotten certain donations for specific properties. So it's not always a town-specific entity, like they'd be a nonprofit organization. And that's okay to include as well. Because I know it's very difficult for towns to ask for donations. You know, there's some tricky laws sometimes to get a part, but there are fundraising activities. But a lot of those, you know, it says Open Space Committee and Rutland Land Conservancy. So,
but do we know, to follow up on her question, do we know who's donated what, when? Do we have a list?
Rutland Land Conservancy definitely has their list, yes. So I know that they have done active fundraising in the past.
In case anybody hasn't heard yet, Rutland Land Conservancy has dissolved, and the property that they have now has gone to DCR.
Which part of DCR?
Unfortunately, it is not the state park side, it'll probably be the watershed side.
So we can color it red like the bulk of the open space in land.
He turned a button on, so I'm not gonna say.
Yes.
Thank you. First, thank you. I think you're doing a tremendous job. I'm very impressed by the knowledge that this committee has. I'm sitting there going, yes, yes. Couple of things, and also just a reminder, most of the positions that are held in town are volunteer. So people have full-time jobs and they're squeaking this through with family and other things. I'm wondering if you have another page. I have questions that I'd like to ask. There's a lot, and I think that if I have the questions and other people have questions, there should be an education. There may be here somewhere, but education, question, answer, you know, frequently asked questions. And I'm wondering if we could put another one up, like, what are your questions? I want to ask about the stormwater. This is an example. I don't want to take the time now, but the stormwater goes into the sewer system, which we're being charged for. So I'd like to be educated on that. There's a lot of things that I'm like, I'm okay with it, but I'd like to understand it. And once I understand that, I can pretty much pick up and run with something and be happy about it. But I did hear it from the director of DPW, so whether that's true or not, I don't know. It was all tied in with the meter being wrong and everything else was part of the conversation. So
I think
when Peter walks in the room, he wants the room. So,
Carol, you're saying the DPW told you that stormwater runs into the sewer system? That is absolutely positively never supposed to happen.
Unless I heard something wrong, and now the whole world of town, the whole town of Rutland knows that.
Stormwater should never ever run into the sewer system. It is separate, and that's why we have an MS4 permit.
And it may be just one particular place that this happened. I don't know.
There could be individual spots. Stormwater always flows into wetlands. Every one of those storm drains goes into a wetland, and that's why at the end of that chain, Conservation Commission has responsibility for what goes into it, into the wetlands. And so we work together with DPW to make sure bad stuff doesn't get in, but that's a complicated issue.
It may be something's failing somewhere, and I misheard.
There have been things that have happened. Now, it's not always been that way. There was a long time when stormwater and sewer were connected and went through the water treatment process, but Jared, do you remember when that was outlawed?
Well, they call them combined sewer systems.
Yeah.
And actually, they do still exist in some cities. Boston still has some left. Worcester still has some left. But what they've been doing, those cities have been doing for a long time, is separating them, creating separate storm drainage from sanitary sewer. But it's a process, and it costs a lot of money to do it. So it's not something that just happens overnight. So I would say certainly separating out storm drainage from sewer, it needs to happen. If there are spots in the town where that's still occurring, where maybe there's still combined sewer systems, it's possible, but the goal would be to separate them.
So,
ultimately,
so my
yes.
public apology if I misunderstood something that I heard.
But it does point out the need for education in
Yeah.
that
I'm glad.
space.
Absolutely.
It points to the need for your frequent.
But yes, so education,
Yeah.
and I'd like, in that sometimes starts, and do we still have a 4-H? Those kind of things,
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition, because I wanna make sure we have enough time, because we have to stop at noon. So we're gonna get through these 3 questions, and if we have time at the end, I would be happy to, and I think other members, to talk with any of you if you have specific questions about whatever is in here. But I wanna make sure we get to our primary goal, is creating our next goals. And if we don't have time at the end, please take a pink sheet, it has our email on it, as long with some QR codes to our social media. Please send any questions you have there, and we will 100% try and figure out something, whether it's a document to put out or just a meeting that we can answer some questions like this again.
Point of process, could you start with what could we do better, go to what more can be done, and then if you have time, go to what are we doing well? Because I think what you really need to hear from us is what could we do better and what more can be done. What are we doing well, you guys probably know.
Yeah. Who wants to be a writer? I'm smiling. All right. Color of choice. Okay. All right. So, and if you want me to bring up a specific slide for the goals, please just let me know. I will be happy if you want to go through them one by one. So, yeah. What could we do better? Go ahead.
I just want to say, this is a blanket comment again for every single committee in the town of Rutland, and I've said this since I got involved in this town specifically, is communication. And it's not open space specifically. It's thank God we have a Mr. Williams who's on 17 committees and a Mr. Crane who's involved in every, those are the lengths. Believe it or not, without people like this, we're totally lost. Because all the work that's done here, the countless hours, this doesn't make it over to the other side. You know what I'm saying? So, like, say today, it would be so nice if there was a member of every single, we got 50% of the select board here, which is fantastic. Imagine if there, and he's on AgCom, he's also on planning board, so he's a conduit to all these other committees. But if we had a list of these committees, and I'd love to see the select board put together an annual meeting so that every single town employee that gets paid either via volunteer work or whatever it is there, and we can talk about, something, because without it, I don't want to say we're just spinning our wheels, because this is all progressively better than what we did yesterday, but if it's not connected up top, a year from now, we could be sitting there saying, we had that whole thing at the library, this was fantastic, and it never, you know what I'm saying, Mr. Lee? He knows exactly what I'm saying.
I would go semi-annual.
Semi-annual, every 6 months, like to get the chairmans of every board at least minimum, along with the rec department and the senior authority and the RDIC and, everybody, because every single board has questions about every single other board, but you never have the opportunity to ask them.
Well, expand on that.
Just so you're right there too, so you know what you, yeah, right?
Sorry, well, communication at both local and state level as well.
Okay.
That was one of the
That
emails I got about communication with DCR.
Nobody knows what we're doing in town.
Exactly.
Well,
That's, I
and
think
where do
another
you-
good point is to add on to that, is to connect it to, let everybody in town on the website somehow include all the residents.
I have to say, I'm sorry. That's okay. But even if we put information out there, it's not getting to the people. And I mean, other than delivering it to their home, which is very expensive, to send something in the mail is very expensive. How
Put it on the website.
but people don't look at the
Well, we
website.
Really don't.
It's
We could
people.
divvy up the town and everybody take a neighborhood.
I think
and
we have
not
to get
all
into
ours.
schools. The kids come home and talk to their parents about what they saw in school. I think that.
Right, so as the rec department, I've always thought, I came on like just before this plan was, the last plan was published, and I thought it was curious that no one from the rec department was on that group, so that was interesting. And then I just looked at all these objectives, and there's a million things on there that I personally could have directly helped with. I have 2,000 Facebook followers, and we send out emails through the schools to every kid in the town on a regular basis. We have connections with the schools. We've
programs in the schools where, you know, we have a million different things going on in the community that we definitely, there's so many things we could have helped with.
But to pick up on
Just to say.
these comments, it seems to, this is about the political dynamics of the town, which I'm very naive about, but I have the impression that certain groups, certain people have more political influence than others. So the question would be, how do people who are interested in open space and recreation gain more political influence on the decisions that are made by the town?
So community involvement.
I was gonna say community
Yeah.
involvement,
Mhm.
and with open space and rec as a priority.
Yeah.
Does that, I mean,
It's really lobbying, isn't it? I
Right.
think, yeah.
at the very grassroots level, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, grassroots, but I mean,
local.
you know, there's a lot, it seemed like, again, I haven't been keeping up with town politics, so I really don't know. I might be missing a lot. But it seems like there are a lot of people here, there, and everywhere in this room who are doing really great work and have great ideas and great plans. And then we hear the state is making decisions, and the RDIC is making decisions, and decisions are being made without seeming to me a lot of lobbying support from the people who want open space and recreation. The developers have a lot of influence. What can counteract that influence for people who are interested in open space and recreation?
Also under what could we do better is just to leverage all of the other kind of active recreation opportunities, because I know there's been a lot of talk about passive recreation opportunities in town, and that seems kind of like what this conversation has been focused on so far. But from my observation, growing up here, as well as raising a family here and now working here, people in the town tend to flock to the active opportunities. So soccer, basketball, planned activities, 4th of July, the festivals, those sorts of things. So how do you leverage all the, you know, participation in those to also support the passive opportunities? And then also, you know, if we're talking about improving parking and bathrooms at different places, the second you turn the key on those and cut the ribbon, they depreciate. And as we've seen in town, our town buildings already, the ones that we own, are falling apart, and we don't have the money to keep up with those. So you have to figure out, how are you gonna fund the depreciation on all the new stuff that comes in? Like, how can you bring those resources together?
I could add two things that just are piggybacking on what people up there said, which is when you have goals, have a process to be checking whether those goals are being met, and have responsible people, you know, that we can go to and say, what's going on with this goal? I think keeping the committee going and having as part of the plan a way of checking that the goals have been implemented and finding out why they haven't been. And the second thing is there a way to protect budgetary money for open space? Because otherwise there's going to be a big sucking noise that's going to go into the schools. I'm all for schools, but the schools are sucking up all the money for everything. Is there a way of getting alternative funds? But can you protect open space funding?
Well, and I think to some of the conversation we had before about the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, those funds are allocated to those specific uses, and it goes into a Community Preservation Act fund.
But that's state money. I'm talking about.
No, this is
Rutland money?
It's both, yeah, it's Rutland money.
Okay.
It just gets a match from the state, so it just adds to the pile.
So it's generally, it is an additional, there's a whole process for the town to have to accept it, and it comes as an additional revenue tax line item on your bill, your tax bill. That tax.
Oh, well, that hasn't passed yet.
No. Those tax dollars then, though, would go into an account that could only be used for what the CPA account designates that it can be used for, and that's a state level designation. So that's one case where it's additional monies that we as taxpayers would have to pay, and it's going for a dedicated purpose. So we can say, yes, we are okay to pay an additional 0.5% or 1%. I think it's 0.5% up to 3% is the
3%.
range the town could opt into. We could say we're
I'm
okay.
for that, but what I'm trying to get at is budget now.
Right.
Because that's like
Yeah.
ephemeral. What I'm talking about is your budget now.
And that's
Can you
what's-
protect that money if the schools need it?
Right, and that's what, I mean, this has been the cycle for decades, right? I mean, it's, the town gets the leftovers from after the school budget comes out or whatever, and the town doesn't have the funds that we need as a town to function, to staff local town government, let alone, function as a local town government, let alone potentially take some property or whatever. So it's definitely a piece that we need to continue to look at, and
Well, that's probably the problem with the Land Conservancy now gone. That was a way to have some money on the side that the school couldn't touch, and now that's
So
gone. So
maybe under what more can we do, we'll put, on the next one, sorry,
that's it.
prioritize allocated budget funding.
Protected, allocated
Protect.
budget.
Protected.
It can be allocated all you want.
Yeah, no, you're right, protected is crucial,
Yeah.
very crucial in this town. Seen too many, all of a sudden, what happened to that money that was supposed to go for sidewalks? They needed it for ice and snow removal or something like that. But I do hope that, I heard something about maybe Quabbin Land Trust maybe coming into town and at an event we might be having soon, so let's hope that we can join together or something like that and be somebody new in town to help us in that respect.
We've also got the Greater Worcester Land Trust who absorbed, was it the White Oak Land Conservancy in Holden?
Yes.
So that might be an option as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we could also add, support local nonprofits, or not support necessarily, but
Collaborate with.
collaborate, yeah. I mean support in the sense of, collaborate, work together, and ensure that they have the resources that they need. We can't necessarily give them funding, but we can help working out priority parcels.
And making those connections too, because if they're not necessarily folks that live in Rutland, and they may not know the people to connect with.
is there? I know like rec department probably has your fundraisers, right? With
Well-
sports, and they do all their.
I don't know,
Maybe it's not rec department. Are they individual?
So we run, for sports, we run basketball, but our department is completely self-funded. So every program that we run, basically the surplus that gets generated pays my salary. And we pay all of our own expenses, and then helps the free events that we put on.
Like all the raffle tickets and all that type of stuff that they
Yeah, we don't do
sell.
any like fundraisers necessarily, but every fee that we generate, it, goes towards rec department
So I think,
expenses.
Kevin, to your point, like Rutland Youth Soccer and Rutland Baseball, Little League,
They're their own
private
organization.
nonprofits that they can do the fundraising pieces. For town, even though rec doesn't receive any general fund money to operate, they're still considered a town department, so it's really hard for them to do fundraising. They're still under
Mine,
the
yeah,
ground.
so
business
kind of my
for
point is you get all these
signs.
private entities, the Little League, the softball, all of them, and then on one of the slides was asking for money. So can we, with some of those, and I'm not saying, it's never easy to take money, but like I look at the townwide yard sale. If everybody's spending $25 to be on the map, could that be $30 and $5 goes to?
So
So
that's
start
right.
looking at all these other little fundraisers that the town's doing, other entities, because the Little League benefits from, we all, it's a symbiotic relationship, there's no doubt, but I'm just wondering if there's ways to look in there so that some of that funding can come back into open space or rec. As you consider them.
Well,
And maybe
it's
creating
similar.
consolidating and creating an actual recreational department.
Well, we have an actual recreation.
I know, but like all the soccer and baseball would come under recreation instead of having separate entities.
I think that would be a huge shift.
So I think that would be
That's right. I
recreation.
think, but I think that's the only way to get to where Kevin's going.
Baseball's gonna give up something.
But I think, and I think recreation I haven't been in town that long, 11 years or so. Recreation has been through many iterations in the short time that we've been here, from a fully appointed town committee to kind of now all the way to Karina working essentially as a recreation director, and then kind of pulling volunteers in as needed, and like working with the pool staff, summer fun staff, all of that. So I think that that's maybe a piece, and it's something I kind of have been pushing for as the town continues to grow, and there's obviously a need, our parents and families are wanting things for their kids to do. And also there's a lot of adults that participate in recreation programming. So how to better capitalize on that active recreation piece and not have it all fall on a part-time individual.
Right, and from my, since I've been here for about 5 years, and the revenue generated by the rec department has doubled in the time I've been here, doubled. Every program we have has a waiting list, and I just see so much potential if the town focused on providing more. It could be, like Holden Recreation turns over, like their recreation funds support their recreation facilities because they have enough capacity to provide programs that they, have the money to resource the tennis
And
courts.
similar, to that point, like recreation, the pool has needed a lot of repairs over the years, and even though that's a town asset, right, it falls to recreation to pay for all those repairs.
But you can't ask for any money.
Right.
That's
So
what-
we're basically
that
taking
doesn't make
people's
sense to me.
kids' dodgeball fees and using it to service the pool pumps.
Right.
So why can't, why can't the open space committee put on a farmer's market or a townwide yard sale up in the center right at, and then any of that money goes to to sponsor the rec department? Why can't another committee raise money for it? If she can't ask for it herself, then if we're not a permanent committee, you know what I mean? I don't know the legalities of all of this, but I
First,
think
it
that
needs
it's.
to be a permanent committee. This
And
is
if it
just
is,
a
are they-
committee to write a plan.
Yeah, so then now is open space able to raise
So what more can be done? Make the open space
Fundraising.
committee permanent.
Absolutely.
Start by
So
making the
much,
open space committee
Open,
permanent.
people open it.
The thing is,
We've done so much fundraising
I
over
think
there.
what I heard you say though is if there was a $50 charge to play soccer, charge $60 and $10 comes back.
Right.
Because the land that they play soccer on is
Why
town
should it
land,
all go
and we
to
lease
Rutland
it to them
soccer?
for,
Right.
what,
$1.
$1 a year.
Right. And I
So-
understand they mow the lawns, they do all that, but
But
I
that's-
don't, why, so they're getting every single penny.
Soccer,
And
in
football, and
particular,
everybody, right.
it all depends.
Baseball.
Like Marshfield is leased, so that is that maintained completely by baseball, softball. The other fields in town are permitted, so they come to me to be put on the schedule. They use the fields, they maintain them during the season as far as like lining them, paying for the goals, all like those sorts of things. And in the past, they've also maintained the turf because the town of Rutland does not maintain the turf at all other than mowing. So there's no aeration, no seeding.
Idea get on the paper though.
So by the end of soccer
Yes,
season,
idea.
the fields are mud, so it would be hard to justify like charging them unless we're then going to say, well, we're gonna put the money back into the fields.
Well,
So
but-
identify additional funding
Well,
for.
more specific than that,
Because
in
if
places where there are fees that are currently being charged, get like $1, $2 that goes to open space. It's not identify additional funding, that's just gonna be another plan that 7 years from now, people like us with gray beards are gonna be saying, what did you do?
Well, so these are the overarching objectives.
I have
These-
waiting lists for every program.
These
We don't
don't
have space,
necessarily
we
get
just
us
don't have the
the
space, so we
specific
should put,
action
I don't even
You
have a
said you
closet.
wanted
I run
implementable
them in
items.
summer
Yes,
camp.
and so this is the first step, just to get the overarching
So do
goals.
better, so we
So the
can-
next step is then, when the survey goes out, when we have a more defined set of actions. So you can still discuss the actions, but I think right now we really want a bigger picture of what we need to start working on.
I
Understand,
always
but I
know
don't
that-
think we wanna lose that action, because we're
Yeah.
gonna get the action.
Yes.
Because I think that,
It sounds like-
it's just full circle to me, I always knew that we only pay, the town only charges $1 for Marshfield, but the DPW mows everything else, they do some You know, I don't know who pays for the storm dust. I know that the
No, all of the private organizations
Behind the
pay
pool.
for all of that.
Up on
DPW
Memorial
mows the
Field.
fields as they are able, which soccer has been like playing in grass up to their knees. By the end of the season, it will be completely mud. It's just, the fields are very bad, very bad.
So you think that
My
they
kids have played organized sports for the last 15 years, and it's embarrassing to play.
So
home
if
games.
you were to
They don't
go back to youth baseball, football, soccer, because they're going to be frustrated from the fields too, and you say, look, we're going to do things a little differently and put some money aside so that the town rec department now has some funds, and if some of that trickles back over the DPW specifically for the fields, I don't think the DPW is going to be upset because now he just added to his budget and we added to the rec
We
department's
just
budget.
need to make
and
sure it
just-
doesn't get lost at town meeting and it doesn't get cut out so that
Or get
soccer gets paid
reallocated
$10 a kid to maintain the fields and then it's snow and ice. Like that's not gonna fly. You know what I mean? So it has to be,
Right.
it goes into that protective.
Maybe you should go around and ask everybody for their top two so that everyone gets a chance to talk.
I just wanted to say, allocating money for any town department, committee, whatever, is a very, very complicated problem overseen by bylaws. If there is, in order to create, I mean, you're allocated money in one of two ways. There's an explicit allocation from the general fund, or you have a revolving fund set up. So if we wanted to do a lot of this, a lot of what you're talking about would have to be done through revolving funds because you don't want a specific town allocation, but then you need to change the bylaw that defines what all the revolving funds are and how much can go into them. It's complicated.
And
But it's not working today, so.
Doesn't mean it can't be done.
So I'm not saying there's nothing that can or should be done. I'm just saying there is no really simple solution. There are only complicated solutions that I know of to get through some of these issues you're talking about.
You keep the funds in a private organization, not a town organization.
I
That's
make
why
a motion
Marshfield
we
is beautiful.
appoint Peter as the uncomplicated person to take care of this thing.
Yeah, that's my strength.
You open up a separate LLC or something, and that's where the money goes.
Okay, so I think we've got the funding aspect. I hate to, we have a half hour left. I just want to make sure that everyone else gets a call. Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about passive recreation because I'm a mountain biker, and right now there are, I believe, 0 single-track trails in town that I can legally ride on. And the news that Dick just brought that the Rutland Land Conservancy gave all their land to the Watershed, that just confirms the one thing that I suspected was that Rutland Land didn't really want mountain biking on their land either. And now that it's DCR, that's confirmed. So I look at the sea of red, of which is all DCR watershed. And you know, I've been, as Dick knows, I've been battling that battle since 2014 and even before to get some of those trails legalized to shared use, biking, hiking, and so on, passive recreation. And as Dick also said, that is completely on hold. There's no progress being made. And in the meantime, the DCR also wants to wind back access to the road network. They want to wind back access to the local lakes and ponds. And they want to knock down the prison camps, level the ruins. All in the name of keeping people out of a water supply that honestly they don't need. And it contributes like 1% of their water, if that, and only because they can, not because they have to. So if we consider that all of that red on this map is completely off limits, then the amount of land available for trails that you can mountain bike on is severely rolled back. And I would say there really aren't any other options. You know, in order to get like a solid ride in, you need like 10 miles plus. So I guess the challenge here is how does this town committee affect change in a town that is largely controlled by the state? And I don't know the answer, but one answer is using models like other communities have where they kind of create networks of private landowners who are willing to offer some of their land to the public for use, right? On the outskirts of their farms or in woods that aren't used, or after a timber harvest, you could go in and make trails or so on. But bottom line is the single track trail availability in this area is abysmal. And yet we're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of acres of open space. So I literally have to drive, if I want to do a legal ride, I have to drive to Leominster State Forest, I have to drive to the city, to a DCR property, or Hubbardston State Forest, of which half of the trails are illegal. So it's like, it's an unsustainable problem. So I'm curious, you guys must have had this conversation, realizing that you're open space committee, but most of the open space we don't have control over. So how do we partner with the state, or how can we influence the state, or how can we make positive changes with private landowners perhaps?
Yeah, so it sounds like expanded use of existing trails for multiple types of passive recreation, and then also identifying parcels for private landowners for multiple passive recreation uses. I think that also relates back to the communication aspect, because I know DCR, and I don't know the specifics about Rutland, so I apologize, but in a lot of other towns has that public access plan that the town's partners with to have permissions for certain trails and what's allowed and what's not. So I think I'd have to do, and the rest of the committee do a little bit more look into what the agreements are, and then if there are availability for additional agreements, that would open up that additional land. But I definitely think that that's something that should be included, that prioritization and of both existing and new places. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Is this Hope Ridge, is that considered the lands that are under the water department's purview?
No.
No, that's their.
Conservation Land Conservancy has rights on that one. Too bad you had your mask on, because I didn't even know it was you. First thing we do is tell DCR Watershed, take a hike, bring in State Park. It's altogether different.
Yeah.
And let State Park, that's one of the things that I was hoping to try to talk to Ian Goby, and I forgot all about it, and then did something else stupid like go for a bike ride. But anyways, we need, on our committee, we need to try to push something different. I've asked the State Park, the gentleman right down here on Long Pond, but no contact. Nobody's gotten a hold of me, or Jeff Skilling's wanted to talk to him also, historic. So I think that's one way of us on our board maybe to, Dave won't like it, or Dan rather, probably won't like it, but I could care less right at the moment.
What you're speaking of is a monumental ask.
It is, of course it is. But this doesn't take a COVID thing for crying out loud to see how many people showed up for recreation all of a sudden. Everything was booming. Come on, get the wheels moving. How can the state do better or whatever? To me, they should be grabbing a hold of this and turn it around and open up the state parks, open it up and stuff, and start pushing. Now, we, the town, we also, I like your idea. I'm a little nervous because I don't know if APR would allow, agricultural preservation restriction would allow that, but it's not a bad thing to try to maybe get a hold of somebody from MDR to have a discussion with on that. It might be worthwhile for the Open Space Committee.
I've got Delia coming on Tuesday. From
Delia would be
MDR.
a good person to talk to.
She's a stewardship planner for APR, Central Mass, and other areas, and she works for MDR, directly, and that was one of my points on this map. And not to bring it down even more, there's more restricted areas on this with, as of today, APR, which is Agricultural Protection Restriction. It's a division of MDR, and a lot of the properties in Rutland back in the 90s sold the rights to a bunch of the farmland. So there's several hundred acres on here that fall under APR, which
on the flip
is
side, APR makes development harder.
right.
So it's not
Aggressively changing as far as what they are allowing on
Right,
their
it was
lands
almost-
and things that you can do, because you're not building a house, you're not building another building, you're having a weekend of something that's maybe a festival or a mud run or a tough mud, those types of things have been allowed now on APR. So things are definitely progressively changing. So that was one of my points. And the other is Treasure Valley. Has anybody ever talked to Treasure Valley about riding bikes down there?
I'm the head of the Trails Committee at Treasure Valley.
There you go. Have you talked to yourself recently?
But Treasure Valley is a unique situation. It is a Boy Scout camp, primarily for youth safety. So they have a very limited public access policy. I'm also the president of the local Wachusett chapter of the New England Mountain Bike Association. And we've negotiated an agreement with Treasure Valley such that our membership can go access the trails at Treasure Valley, but general public cannot. Only the Mid-State Trail is the only permitted trail through Treasure Valley for the general public.
And this could be something, if they're more comfortable with permitted, then you buy a pass. And now the Boy Scouts of America have, it's John Smith, he lives in Hopkinton or wherever it is, but now they know who's gonna be on the property all the time.
Right.
So then they get paid X amount of dollars, and maybe 5 of those dollars goes back to our LLC, so this could all be, and I see where the Boy Scouts are coming from. They've been under, they need to be very, very careful in who they allow on their properties and all that type of stuff, so.
Can I just connect with you after? Because I had some interesting conversations during COVID with some of the environmental police, and so.
Sure,
Yeah.
And the other point that I just wanted to make to yours and to Mr. Williams, AgCom, another one, looping this all together. You talk to AgCom, maybe AgCom can get out to some of the farmers and say, hey, and then you look at a map and you've got these connections, and all of a sudden there's a 30-acre piece here, there's a piece over here.
Yeah.
I look down in Turkey Hill, the Calkins, there's a lot of people that have the Lehman-Tynan's property, all those. I can't speak for anybody, but you can knock on the door and say, hey, can we follow along your stone wall? They may or may not allow, but there's a lot of landowners in
Or
town
maybe
that
that
own
comes-
10, 15, 20 acres, and we start connecting them all.
And maybe that comes to the committee, assuming it becomes a permanent committee to help make those connections with the private landowners. So it's not up to an individual or an individual entity, but we're doing it as part of the open space and recreation plan. And we're wondering if you would be amenable to this, working with this group or whatever.
You can get a mailing list of all 61A properties owners.
And
then
even
every
then
61A property
identifying-
owner is somebody that has over 5 acres and pays a lower tax, so every 61A property owner in Rutland
Yeah.
would get a letter saying, are you interested?
Yeah, and identifying private landowners also that maybe don't have restricted land, but may be a good connection through, and if they would be amenable to at least having a conversation, not anything. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll just close with, and Dick, you're familiar with this. The Central Tree used to have, middle school used to have a mountain biking program. And they had at its peak 55 students that would basically gather at the school and ride down the rail trail, down, unfortunately down, what do you call it, Palmagussit to the rail trail and down into the watershed. And then they got kicked out of the watershed. So the group built some trails in Rutland Heights, and then that got lost, and the future of the property was so uncertain that they didn't restore, nobody wanted to restore the trails afterwards because they were destroyed. So the program disbanded. So there's 55 kids that would have had a lifetime activity, no team, no facility required, just go out, and you can, anywhere there's a trail, you can go. Health, physical and mental health benefits like you read about. So it's really sad. So that's why I want to couple with passive recreation, a couple passive with the active recreational programs here, and just offer that as another option for the kids.
And just over the stone wall is APR property and woods all along it too.
Yeah, there's a lot of land, it's just the permission is.
There is a lot of land, I think we can see that from the maps. There's a lot of land that we have that is protected, but what is usable, what's not, and what do we want to have usable? What do we want it usable for? So I think, we're having these really good conversations, and I hate to really shut it down, but I think we're going to move to lightning rounds. We have about 20 minutes left, so, I think what's on the top of your heads of what is, in a perfect world, if, say, there's no red tape to cross, what would your priorities would be? What would you want to see start happening next year for the next 7 years?
Can I put up one more?
Yeah.
Like a specific thing, connecting the town center to the rail trail.
Yep.
Okay.
I know that that's coming with the Route 56 overhaul, whenever that starts, but that's still an on-road connection. That's gonna be, you're gonna have a bike lane down to the tunnel, right? So that'll be there. But there is I've been told by an ex-select person that there is a town easement down to Miles Road from the DPW and the library here. There's literally a lane.
Going down.
Yeah, so that could be leveraged. So I just wanted to put that specific thing up.
And we're also in the goals, in that it was supposed to be from Putnam Park over to the rail trail also, so that the Putnam Park could be utilized.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
And the connectivity then from, downtown all the way down to Putnam Park, it's sort of like the sidewalks fizzle
Yeah.
out, and
So
even
general
biking
connectivity,
along Main
walkability.
Street there is, not something you'd want your kids to do. So,
And that's one of the things also, sidewalks that we're gonna be trying to
Yep.
push.
yep, sidewalks and
And that's definitely
connectivity.
come out in the town center zoning and master plan as well, so I think that's great, having that consistency and congruency all around, so definitely including it in this is the perfect way to demonstrate that.
I would also add just for the, other, in addition to mountain biking, which would be great to enhance, access to that, would be other passive recreation, and lots of people have dogs here. We don't have a dog park in town. I know people, we drive to Worcester for that. Or like disc golf is another fairly easy, it takes mowing and a few stands. You could set up a disc golf course in different places and just opportunities for getting kids involved too.
Yeah. It sounds like just expanded general uses of recreation is a high priority in those people. I know that's very broad, but I think at this point that's good, breaking it down, we do have mountain biking, we do have connectivity.
And there is a disc golf course underway in town.
Yeah.
Is there?
Oh, in the farm,
Yeah.
No, it is, and that's why, when we went through and we added that agritourism bylaw in there, it was listed specifically, and there's no reason why mountain biking and archery shooting and, paintball, all these other things that are outdoor activities, the ropes courses, they're minimal impact to the land, and I think that's something conservation recognizes, open space recognizes.
Yeah, and I guess to build off that, one thing that at least I think that we could do better is, planning board has their open space design, maybe incentivizing that a little bit more. Most open space now, they require a conservation restriction, so incentivizing that process and having that open space conservation restriction a little bit more publicly accessible, depending on the use in the property is a good thing to think about.
I just like as a simple priority to buy more forested land and preserve it for wildlife or mountain bikes, just buy more forested land and preserve it, but with what money? And that's why I keep going back to how is all of this funded? It's great to have a plan, but my priority would be something smaller that can be implemented is better than something that sounds great and nothing ever happens.
Yeah, so it sounds like maybe one of our overarching objectives will be strictly funding, and that's okay, because I think that's a big hurdle to come over. So if that's one major blurb, and we focus strictly on the funding aspect and we get those done in the first 3 years, that could open us up to these rest of these actions and objectives.
I don't know if Kevin was going to say something, but one of the things in the planning board and the town center we had pushed is maybe having a person hired by the town for nothing but grant writing, period. And to me, that would be ideal.
No time.
Idea to have something like that because
Especially now, there's money out there.
I think we should add to better just increase
That would
staffing
be
in
huge.
general.
Justify it.
I think
I'd put it up
Salary.
there, yeah.
go on there.
Doug, on that point, real quick, I don't want to go down a rabbit trail, but would that be for all the commissions, by the way?
it should be for
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it should be, we could use it too on historical.
Yes.
Anybody could use
Big
it.
time.
I don't know if this has ever come up before, but when I was on the Board of Assessors, we went through a slew, and it was months and months of abatements filed by builders in town, specifically Mr. Blair. We spent a lot of time going through him. He owns property that is, at the end of every single development, there's a cul-de-sac, right? Or there's, what he'll do is, I'm just gonna stand up a little bit, there's a house here, a house here, a house here, and then he owns the land behind it so that when they sell the house, you can never build behind it, but it's only 10 feet of land, right? 5 feet of land. It's a cul-de-sac. It's all these little pieces of property. So my question is, he didn't want to pay any more taxes on it. Each one of those pieces of property generates minimal revenue to the town, in all honesty. That doesn't bring a lot of money to the town in tax dollars. There was a lot of work that we went through, and I even approached him, what are you doing with that one? What are you doing with that one? He goes, I'd sell it tomorrow. So my question is, can there be a connection with your neighborhood that owns all these lands? Can somebody behind them buy all these other little pieces of property? Or if it's a cul-de-sac, could a business purchase that?
No,
Or could
no,
somebody?
this is my backyard.
I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is that the property is owned by somebody else that's paying minimal taxes on it. That property owner may get rid of that. Could that be utilized in a way that either it's given back to the town, it's bought by the town? There's just a lot of land that, and even on, and some of it is beautiful, it can never be built, but could it be a place with some benches and a place for somebody to go, and a new little town park, or a new little, so,
Yeah, assessment of leftover parcel.
right, could this now become part of open space? Would he just say, I don't want it anymore, and sign it over because, you know, it's, 400 tax bills he's getting all the time?
My understanding is that it's wetlands that can't be developed.
Exactly, but it's still owned by him and he's still paying, or whoever it is. My whole point is that maybe he doesn't want to own it anymore. Maybe the town could purchase it, and then maybe that could be utilized as open space.
I would
Think
be
forward, Kevin,
terrified.
from now on, for open space, it's gonna be, a lot of homeowners associations will be involved with those open space parcels.
And maybe the homeowners association purchases the land. Maybe it could be utilized as a way to generate revenue. That's my only
I
point.
think the town should have an eye open if it's decent land and we can make access very easy for the rest of the town. I think the town should get it.
Like the backside of Calkins Pond, Nelson, whatever you want to call it, Molten Pond, a couple different names. The rail trail goes right there. He's got that, nobody can ever go in there, but it's 15 acres behind. It's that Billy's, I forget which Blair's has the house up there, and all that land down there. I don't want that thing. They don't want the property anymore because a builder isn't going to be able to ever utilize it. He just assume wash his hands of it. And we drove around in the car together, and he's like, I just assume not be dealing with all this stuff. It's a pain for him. That's why he tried to file all these abatements so that it could be nullified.
Or maybe changing the subdivision bylaw to have better access for
Open
those open
space.
space properties being accessible and undeeded to us.
Well, the two things I wanted to say is that number one, the town of Rutland historically has not bought land.
Or take it if they give it to it.
Unwilling
You don't want it.
to take it off the tax rolls.
Nobody wants it.
That would be a change of select board and maybe other people perhaps to make that happen. I don't know. But number two, the other thing about open space that's very important is a way to get to it.
Yes.
An open space lot that cannot be got, that doesn't have public access is not useful. But that means easements, and that means changing deeds on properties that abut so the public can get to it. Again, I'm not saying it can't or shouldn't be done. I'm just saying, here he goes again, it's complicated and it's work.
And it's working now with private homeowners.
And it costs money.
So,
But I still think identifying some of these parcels that are easily accessible, and all of a sudden you make a phone call, and now, there's that possibility.
I just want to say thank you to the commission for all your work. I'm excited to hear it. I live on Charnock Hill Road, and I ride and walk around there a lot, and there's so much Japanese knotweed that worries me, and I know it's hard to get rid of, but that would be one of my things to add to the...
invasive species.
There's grants for that. There's grants for that. There's grant money you can go after to
But-
get invasive species out here.
The guy said if you,
On roads and
yeah, if you, 10 years apparently it phases out. 10 friggin'
Mow
years.
it like grass is what
Oh
he
yeah, and the
said.
guy was like, just mow it like grass.
He said mow it to death.
Mow it to
I think
death.
that was the term he
For a
used.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Mow it to death.
Doesn't even doing it.
If
you mow it,
No.
So,
might be, I don't know.
if you
We have
hit
bindweed,
it for
like
enough
we
years, and if you
Yeah.
get it before it flowers,
Now.
it looks
You
so
should
great.
see
You
how
think it's a
wet
wonderful
tractor
flowering
is.
plant. It's really not.
that's bindweed, bitter.
But yeah, mow it
It's the same thing.
before it
Yeah,
flowers
it
and
is
mow it as much as you
It
can.
is terrible.
That's the best non-chemical way
Okay.
to do it. And the studies have now showing that in 10 years, which is a long time, but in 10 years, we might see that knotweed phasing out, which is an interesting wait.
So, I thought that when he said about mow it like grass, like
Yeah.
once or twice a week mow it, because then it'll get sun starved and it won't be, the roots, the tubers won't be able to continue to grow. That you should see a noticeable reduction after a year and then a more noticeable after 2, I thought. So it's not gonna be eradicated, it's gonna take a lot of time, but
I definitely, yeah, and I think also going back to communication, because we have so many state roads, so our main roads are state maintained. So working with them, because it's not necessarily a priority for MassDOT right now, but I think the creation of some plan at least town level is.
And I will say, I know when the Conservation Commission receives applications and stuff, they ask if there's knotwood, Japanese knotwood, and what their mitigation plan is, and if they're following the state-approved process and everything. So it is, it's on someone's radar, the Conservation Commission's radar for sure, but I think getting that communication out to homeowners, because it's invasive on a lot of personal properties as well, so, yeah.
Maybe I'll knock on doors on Barracks Hill Road and just tell them, you know, it's.
Excuse me, can you mow your lawn?
Well, it's not their lawn, it's
Yeah.
on the road, but it's gonna end up in their lawn.
Yeah, and a downside also, widespread mowing is difficult. That's why, if you're just mowing in your lawn and you keep up with it, it will theoretically reduce. But if you're just mowing it on a roadside, that mower is gonna keep spreading it down. So there's different techniques for different properties. So I think, that overarching plan on residential lawns, it works, it's fine because it's already in that area, it's contained. But, when you're just kind of hacking down a roadway, that's a little bit different.
What would you do on a roadway then?
Sometimes, hacking and leaving, or just being cognizant of your mower blades. Whether it's they have a bucket of water with them, or if they have the truck following them, to just spray them down before they leave the area. It's just the pollen and the seeds that will disperse pretty easily if it's depending on the season.
And that's with roadways, they're not mowing it nearly as frequently as what you can mow in your lawn. So
and they're
it's
just
not
going down with a weed eater,
So it's probably already flowered, already seeded, or in the process, and then can spread. Where if you're able to catch it in the spring and keep up with it throughout the year, then your risk of spreading it is
Okay.
right.
In the spring,
Education.
Yeah, so education.
Education,
You can always
communication, and
just cross
fundraising,
it.
those are the three things. Education,
I think
communication,
we've
and
merged
fundraising.
the
You can't
second and the third one,
do the
Leah, so
education.
just-
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
You wanna flip it over?
No, I got it. Education, communication, and fundraising. So
And actually, I could see that could be objectives for every one of the, right? Address each of those in every overarching goal, is those 3 points.
Yeah, with the
And
specific
then
different action
Yeah.
plans or whatnot. Okay. Last thought, yep.
I don't see up there, someone had mentioned semi-annual meetings of
Every,
Yeah.
of the stakeholders, or.
I think we should bring that up, Vic, at our meeting, and make sure that make sure he communicates with the TA and.
Yeah.
So I
know.
had been trying to work with Mike Nicholson when he was here to get it, and then with all the transitions and everything, I mentioned it to Ron, and it kind of very quickly fell off because everybody is doing so much. But I think that there's a lot of value in it, and I think it's not going to be a quick meeting. I think it's we need to block off kind of half a day and really use it as like a workshop type meeting.
Retreat.
Yeah, a retreat.
Or a retreat.
A whole situation.
Right. But I think that the information that could come out of that is.
But I think Ron's gotta facilitate it and basically make it mandatory. Right?
It might even be worth bringing in a professional facilitator.
I was like, I've worked with professional facilitators, and I think something of that level to get it productive.
Yes.
Productive.
You get better benefits out of it as a professional.
If it's gonna be half a day, it'd have to be on like a Saturday or something.
Yeah.
It's good
Like
people
this.
who work on
Right.
shit with chairs.
Right.
Always reminds me of one night the select board had a joint meeting, and Mike Nichols was astonished because he thought he was able to get $50,000 to do a study for the community hall, and just I'm gonna say maybe 70% of the people, no, we need a new town hall. What? So, yes, we need meetings like that.
Or at least
Did you have something?
got
Your hands up.
Yes, kind of piggybacking with the communication, I think. Granted, I think part of our issue on the historical commission is that we were reformed, reconstituted, whatever you want to call it, around 2019, 2 years after this plan came out. But I think if each commission, each town commission, each chair, even every member, anybody who's got any appointed position, elected position, anything like that should have a copy of this. And just as a resource, for example, we were looking at scenic roads. on the historical commission. And if I knew that that was one of the goals on here from 2017, I would have cited that right out. That would have been like forefront. And that would have been a huge help to our cause, and now it's gonna have to wait until spring.
So kind of ongoing introductions per se to the open space and recreation plan.
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. Well, once the 2022 plan comes out,
I think that
it
speaks to
says
that
responsibility.
implementation.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of had an idea through, we kind of knew through our charge that historical commission had a lot of that in there, but how was I to know that that was a priority on some document that I think this is the first time I'd seen it?
Well, I think that's something that maybe not a goal, but an objective of the committee itself, yes, is, making sure that if we do, or even if you don't have something that we want to make you responsible for, that
Right.
you're understanding and that it's something that is reasonable, because I think we're gonna have goals that are big and lofty that, maybe aren't exactly as realistic as we would hope within 7 years, but maybe there's some subsidiary that we can get started on. Absolutely.
Does Beth or somebody on the select board or have one email that gets sent out to,
Yeah,
that's a good place to
she
start.
did
Is
for
like,
this,
is there
yeah.
a click of a button that I'd get it, you'd get it, he'd get it on historical? Can
Yeah.
she send out one email?
So I think she
she
can send it
did,
out
yeah.
to the chairs and the department heads.
Mhm.
So I think is what she.
But to his point, it's not to every single member or every single.
Correct, well, correct.
I don't think it's also just town emails, maybe, I don't think they have every single personal email on every board. I
That's
know,
my
like, I
point,
don't have a
yeah.
town email, it can be
But it
difficult.
could be done.
Yeah, it can be done, but I
It
think.
should be done.
I think
That's how
it also runs into the risk of open meeting law violations if people.
Right.
So
So
send
I
it
think
to the
she normally
chairs.
sends it to department heads and chairs and asks them to distribute it to their respective boards, commissions, committees, and departments and
Okay.
everything. The departments don't have the open meeting law requirements that the boards and commissions do, but just,
Gotcha.
Any,
That- One last thing before you go close this thing up, I do hope that in the future, maybe we can try to get some kind of an organization or somebody else to take everybody out for a walk in some parts of this town.
Yep.
Personally, get your hands dirty is my thing, and I love it. And if I get an opportunity, I can't walk very well anymore, but I'd love to, take somebody for a walk.
that's
Might
something
go
we
for a
talked about on this committee is,
Yeah.
as, once the weather is, it's nice now, but we weren't sure about doing something like this outdoors was our original hope, but we wanted to have a presentation and everything, but doing like, hey, we're gonna meet at Putnam Park for anybody that wants to show up, and, we'll go explore just, an hour or two or whatever. We're gonna go to Hope Bridge and explore, we're gonna go to the state park and look at the, prison camps, or, just, and whoever wants to show up, shows up, and it's just.
I would definitely, there's the open space maps, there's a little pink sheet with our social media information and your email. So if you haven't grabbed one, please do. I think all of us, especially from the input that we've had today, are ready to be more interactive, communicative. Whether I'm hoping we become a permanent committee and we do have these activities, I think this is a great start for us. And thank you for all of this, and if you have last minute comments, something that's still itching at your brain, either talk to us a little bit now. I know a couple of us have to skedaddle. I know it's a busy time, so I thank you guys all for being here between sports and everything else. There's an email on there if you have any comments. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out. We do take it very seriously. We meet, I don't know what our schedule is at this point, we're all over the place, but typically once a month. So if you ever want to, join us, we're typically on Zoom, but it's a public meeting. You're always welcome to attend. Even if there's not public comment on there, you want to have a quick talk, then please let us know. But otherwise, we're here if you need us. If you think of something when you get home, my email's there. Otherwise, feel free to take a marker wherever I put them. And if you want to put up to 5 hash marks on anything we wrote down on your top 5 priorities, please do. And even if you want to add something, just don't put it in black so it doesn't blue in. I don't know why, but please
And maybe for what we're doing well, if you have questions that you want to put, instead of
Yes.
necessarily what you're doing well, just
Yeah.
what we're doing well, just put questions, because I think we got a little bit of a sense of what we've done well, and a lot of it is more what we need to do better and what we should be doing. So,
And take a donut and coffee to leave.
Melissa, before we disperse, we just want to let everybody know, there is one open seat on this
Oh,
committee
yes.
right now.
There's one open seat,
So if you're interested in getting involved, you can snag that.
and it's just a regular at-large position, so.
Does it have to be an at-large, or could it be the rep?
Well, I'm a resident.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
She's it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
I know.
I will post an agenda, so I want to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. 12:04.
I'll see you.